Hello, welcome at the podcast Let Them Talk. My name is Jean-Hugues Bobbert, and every podcast series we have a new guest, an esteemed guest who's going to talk about leadership, craftsmanship, entrepreneurship, and in this time we have Jean-Hugues Migeon. Jean-Hugues Migeon is the CTO and founder of Anove, and Jean-Hugues is from French, but we are going to talk about that today. We're going to specifically talk about entrepreneurship between France and the Netherlands, because you are from France, obviously because your name already reveals that you're not from the Netherlands and not from any other country. So who is Jean-Hugues and what brought you here?
Well, that's a very large, very big question. Well, I am who I am, right? No, so I'm French, I'm 30 years old, and I'm in the Netherlands for the past 6 years now. I'm a lawyer by background. At least I studied law, but I'm not really practicing it anymore, at least in a slightly different way nowadays. I came 6 years ago, right after I graduated from law school. I graduated in international public law, which is basically the law that governs the relationship between the countries. And I was specialized more into the work of the International Court of Justice that is here in The Hague. But in the last 6 months of my studies, I decided to specialize into something that would, give me a job, because I needed to find a job. And exactly at the same time, the privacy regulation, general data protection regulation was entering into force in May. So I decided to write my master's thesis on the GDPR and actually the fundamental conceptual differences of privacy between Europe, China and Japan, so East Asia and North America, explaining actually how we, let's say, conceive the right to privacy differently depending on the cultures. And well, when I graduated, I was hired by you at the Nationale-Nederlanden as an information security trainee. At the time, I had no idea what an ISO or a CISO was, Chief Information Security Officer.
Yeah.
But I played my cards well, and you hired me in the end.
Yeah.
And then we did a couple of things together since then.
Yeah, perhaps also good for the listeners and nice to hear is that one of the things that you did there in Nationale-Nederlanden is that, well, first of all, you were hired indeed, because I can still remember that you came in with the vacancy. So we had an interview with each other, and then you mentioned, Yuri, in my free time, I built an intelligent mirror, and I was thinking, an intelligent mirror, what's the guy talking about? And then you explained me how you built this mirror that actually was also recognized voices or faces, and also with automatic lighting. So I was thinking, hey, this guy is doing things that is out of the ordinary. So there you have a lawyer who's actually capable of building things. And at that point, we, as Nationale-Nederlanden and in group, we wanted to encourage an engineering culture. And ideally, you want to have people that also are able to disrupt things. So that was my first acquaintance with you as an entrepreneur. And then after that, we actually built this technology called the blockchain. It's still present, by the way, the website. I don't know if you know this, the website, the blockchain.
Blockchain.eu.
Talking about locking the chain of DevOps engineers, risk management, security management people working together in a chain and locking that by the evidence in the code. It's a bit technical for now, perhaps, but that was our first experience with building technology. And then we did that with Ontoit. We built actually a part in this AUXO Zero Trust as a Service platform where you basically measure all sorts of security. And then we found the idea about Anove, but I'll let you talk about the Anove app and about Anove technology. But first I have another question, and that is what inspires you to start your business here in the Netherlands? Because Paris is, for example, also known for its incubation of new startups, specifically in the AI space. But what made you decide to start it here? And what was crucial in terms of finding the right ecosystem between, because you still do a lot of business also in France, between the Netherlands and the French market?
Yeah. So, well, actually, even before starting this business, I had my own business in France, although it was just a small consulting firm, and I was by myself.
That was in data privacy, yeah?
Yes, exactly. So started in 2019, and it started out actually completely, well, let's say by chance. My brother is a midwife, but he's also an entrepreneur, and it was at the time also where GDPR was also let's say pushing onto healthcare professionals, and he was receiving a lot of quotes from other consulting companies, and he told me, well, isn't GDPR your thing? Can you do something for me? I said, yeah, sure, of course, I can do it. And then one thing leading to another, said, maybe it's better to have a company for professional insurance to make sure that at least you're guaranteed with what I'm providing you. And actually, well, that's how it started. So he pushed me for it, and then, well, he started to talk about some of his colleagues and other independent healthcare professionals. And well, I did, let's say, my journey locally in France, in Lyon, doing it most of the time remotely. But it created a foundation for what is Anove AI, Anove as of today, sorry, and Anove AI as well. But when it came to creating a company, I have to say, I felt that the Netherlands had a lot of flexibility in terms of creation and starting a business. Um, well, it depends on which aspect, but most of the time, I see that in the Netherlands, it's easier to find people with whom you want to exchange, and especially at the start of a company and as a startup, it's very important that you keep connection with the people around you in your industry, because that's what prevents you from falling into your own idea. And in the Netherlands, because everything's so interconnected, I mean, we are in The Hague, but you have Amsterdam that is less than an hour by train. You have Utrecht, you have Rotterdam, you have even Delft, where you have a lot of engineering minds. And it was really helpful to have such an interconnected country because everything's around. Uh, Everyone's not far. I mean, we see people that live at the other side of the country, but they still come to work in The Hague because it's only less than 2 hours drive. And that makes it a super environment for constantly exchanging, and it makes it an effervescent place. So for a startup, it's ideal, I would say, compared to France, which is way bigger, where of course Paris is very big, but I'm not from Paris, and Paris is super expensive. And in Lyon, there is also this will to foster startups. Um, but it was at some point also a matter of choice. But I have to say, the Netherlands really has this, let's say, this will to push for startup and innovation.
And what would you consider then the biggest, let's say, challenges that you have encountered when you started your business here in the Netherlands and then working in France, so going back basically to France? Was there any challenge or?
Yeah, so well, from a pure customership perspective, of course, it's hard to enter the French market when you are when you are from another country and you don't have, even though you're French, but if you are based in another country, it makes it difficult. The French market has, let's say, appealing as it can be, has its own established rules where you have to speak French for the support. For example, you have to provide a tool in French. You need to know a bit how it works. It's way more hierarchical and vertical than in the Netherlands, where, for example, after one or two meetings, you will call each other by the first name, like, "Hey, Yuri, dear Yuri, it's very nice to see you during the second meeting." Whereas in France, you will have a lot of sir and madame and a lot of deference towards the people. It's just a different approach. It's actually also very nice because there's a lot of, well, respect. Not that there's none in the Netherlands, but it's more like it's a lot of protocol that sometimes is also appreciable because and appreciated because people like this dual approach, this respectful approach around the business. So to come back to your question about the struggle, I would say, well, apart from, let's say, the slight cultural differences, and also because I had worked for so long in the Netherlands, I had a bit forgotten how it was in France. I had to readapt a bit, but I have to say, with nowadays how Europe is, there's no borders, there's no problem moving from one country to another, or just going for or even for a day where we have a meeting in Paris. You just take the Thalys, and in 2 hours, less than 2 hours, you're there. So it's, I mean.
And if you look in terms of opportunities, so what do you see as biggest opportunities between the two countries?
Well, so first, in the Netherlands, you have an opportunity to innovate, and a bit more this also American approach to business, or more or less flexible approach, where you can fail. I see that there is, I see people who don't necessarily have a lot of good ideas, but they just try. And I see that in the Netherlands, whereas in France, a lot of people have ideas, but they don't try. They are not testing, also because let's say the legal system around businesses and the business law in France is quite harsh. I mean, not flexible enough. We have a couple of systems nowadays for helping people to start as a freelance. We've seen a lot, like ZZP'ers in the Netherlands or auto-entrepreneur in France. So with less taxes, and it's easier, less, let's say, emphasis onto the accounting, or let's say the rules are a bit relaxed. But the moment you want to scale up, or at least have 1 or 2 employees, in France it becomes immediately very difficult, which makes it way more difficult to scale in France at the beginning. On the other hand, what I see is that the Dutch market is super crowded, of course. I mean, if it makes it, let's say, you have to really have great ideas to let's say stand out.
Do you mean the startup market or
The
the
startup
labor
market?
market?
The startup market. The labor market is very good here. I mean, it's very easy to find a job. I mean, it's easy in France too, but it's easier here. But the country is small. A lot of companies are here, and the French market is very appealing. So I see now why so many Dutch companies look at the French market and say, "Ooh, that would be nice to be there," because, well, we're talking about a country that's 5 times the size of the Netherlands in terms of population, way bigger in terms of territory, so more surface to cover. So of course more offices, for example, if you have to, so more points to cover. And when you enter the French market, you do efforts to speak French, and then you have a whole new market in Africa that is being opened, and in other countries. So the moment that you manage to enter this, it's actually, and you are in one of the top market in the world. So France is very appealing, difficult to enter, but once you are there, it's actually a very good one.
So Jean, you were also awarded as the Dutch French Entrepreneur of the Year, which was awarded by you, or to you, by the Dutch Chamber of Commerce, or the French Chamber of Commerce, doing business in France, but also in the Netherlands. And you are also one of the driving forces behind the Chamber of Commerce to create initiatives and to establish initiatives. At least that's what you give me as an impression. No, but I know you do. And but I was wondering, what strategies do you develop to enter the French market out of the Netherlands with your tech company?
Yeah, well, thanks. Well, first, allow me to say that the French Chamber of Commerce in the Netherlands, I mean, I'm not part of it, as they do like a tremendous job to really, let's say, develop the relationship between the two countries. And really, I have to say that it's, I mean, was a great honor for me to receive this prize of French Entrepreneur 2024. But so how do we approach it? I have to say, we need to find, let's say, you need to select where you want to go in France. Let's say, geographically speaking first, because the people in Paris or in Lyon will not react the same way. I mean, it's a bit, let's say, stereotypical. But I have to say, you won't approach, Parisians are used to do business, and they are like a bit more like what you would find in Amsterdam, for example. So it's easier coming from the Netherlands to do business in Paris, and everything's there. It's a very centralized country. But I've made a choice to go towards Lyon also because that's where I have my roots, also because where I have had my network, where it's more person to person. Again, I mean, it's a bit stereotyped, but that's more, let's say, you do a deal not company to company, but between two persons, and then expands to the rest of the company. And you need to choose a vertical as well. So in France, it's very difficult to try to cover all the markets. In the Netherlands, it's also very difficult, of course. You can't do healthcare and constructions and water management all at the same time. It's difficult, but because everything's close by, everyone knows each other, or at least in the security sector and the tech sector. In France, it will be a bit more difficult. I was talking about this, let's say, more deference and respect. You have like a piece of the market in France that's controlled by very large companies, like top companies in France. And you have then the whole medium-sized company, medium-sized businesses in France. That's a huge landscape. That's enormous. I think in Europe it's probably has the second or third biggest amount of businesses, medium-sized businesses in Europe. I think after Germany and Italy, not taking into account UK. They're not part of Europe anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
we have those statistics, by the way. We can put them in the side note because this is part of the geographical strategy of vertical markets that we have as Anove, but we can put them in the show notes.
So I would say choosing first where to implement yourself geographically speaking. So I chose Lyon. Paris will be, let's say, easier in terms of interaction that you will have with companies, but also more difficult because it will be colder in terms of relationship. If you are let's say my way of approaching a business is being more like talking to the people, really finding the needs and really finding a tailored solution to their problems. And it's even if it involves like a more, let's say, human approach. I mean, it's a bit weird when you are talking about, for example, providing a SaaS or even providing tech services, but it actually the human factor matters a lot. And I see that it makes a difference when you add a bit of consulting here, or you just put a bit more efforts and will into the people themselves. You solve their, let's say, human problems. They are actually more keen. And for me, that was my approach.
Yeah, well, what kind of other initiative or startup initiative are you engaged in the France market?
Yeah. So well, I am the CTO also of another company that works for the healthcare industry called Medical Place. I started as a data protection officer there, and then, well, we develop our partnership and relationship with Sébastien, the CEO of the company, and it's basically a company that is a prospect relationship manager, but focused on the healthcare industry. In France, what you have is a lot of open source data onto healthcare professionals and healthcare in general. That's part of, let's say, the strategy of France, where you want to open as much as possible so that you can serve also better the healthcare market, and that the healthcare industry, well, can do more tailored approach so that we can cover the whole territory with healthcare services. And basically this technology from Medical Place is a super prospect relationship manager for medical device manufacturer, where they can really target exactly, for example, if they have a specific type of probe for ultrasound system that only is used for certain acts, medical acts, they can actually find who are the top 15 specialists in France that are performing the most amount of acts for of this specific act, and that would be potentially interested into their probe. So that's a very advanced. I have to say, Sébastien had a great idea, and now technology is also embarking artificial intelligence. So yeah,
And what kind of customers do they have then?
So I can't really disclose names per se, but they have ultrasound system manufacturers.
The vendors of the medical devices.
So the vendors of the medical device, the manufacturers of the medical device, so very, very large ones, but also for MRI machines. You have now you have also some professional insurances that are interested. So for insurances for professional healthcare professionals that are interested, because that helps them develop, and that's really focused on that. So
so that is pure and focused on data governance. So they collect data, they slice and dice it and visualize it, and then sell that data to other type of
so the approach we've decided to take is even because that's why also I was involved from the beginning, is we wanted to protect the privacy and the rights of all the healthcare professionals. So the way we approach it is that it is anonymized to a certain point, and then the identity of the healthcare professional is revealed if the healthcare professional allows it and allows to reveal a certain part of information. But also it helps in really streamlining the type of information that is being sent. So you really reduce the spam. So there is also this aspect. And what is nice is that the platform, because now it's a platform where it started by a prospect relationship manager, but it's also a customer relationship manager, so the natural evolution. But it's also evolved as a platform for healthcare professionals to manage their own, let's say, e-reputation. So they can log onto with their unique identifier, and then they can indicate, whether the information is correct, that is displayed on the openly, so that's open source data. But also they can correct. For example, we have data about which articles they participate in, or which specialty. For example, if they are specialists onto that enzyme, and they can find other healthcare professionals that work on the same topics, and that helps also in building this relationship. So now the platform is also evolving towards helping building bridges and connection between healthcare professionals, and I really like that approach as well.
So that's also a little bit like where you build a reputational database about which professional is capable of performing a specific act, but also how they can compare to others in the industry. So like
and work together, where they can find people they don't necessarily know, but that are specialized or worked on the specific issue that they have, and can more easily find them.
Nice. It reminds me of the technology plural side, where basically in this case coders, so the software development coders can rate each other's code, and then the higher you get in the rank, the more attractive you are for the market, because you are the best coder, but you're being judged by other coders.
There's not a rating system. I'm not sure from a data protection point of view. I would be very happy with it because it's very subjective. Especially in the medical sector. I think you have Google comments for that, but
exactly.
No, but that's, let's say, side cases, side effects, positive side effects that we see. So.
And are there any other specific industries where France and the Netherlands complement each other in a particular way?
Well, healthcare, definitely. I have to say. The French healthcare system is very open in a sense that there's a lot of data available, of course. There's also a big knowledge in France. And I see in the Netherlands, for example, with Philips, that you have some leading companies that are capable of providing healthcare systems. So you can really see that let's say, a system that is being deployed onto the Netherlands. Netherlands is sometimes used a bit as a test case before France, and then you can deploy it largely. So that completes a lot on that part. I would say also in the security sector, France is really a leader in that sector. I have to say the ANSSI or even the CNIL from the data protection aspect, they really act as leader in Europe. And I see, for example, the Autoriteitspersoonsgegevens, the Dutch CNIL, is following in its decision or in its reasoning decisions that are made by the CNIL. And the same for ANSSI, that is, let's say, pushing for its security requirements that they align more and more with the rest of Europe, and that actually Netherlands is aligning with France.
Do you, by the way, also see differences in the approaches of, for example, investors in startups and scale-ups in the Netherlands versus France? Or is there any difference in that culture there?
Yeah, so I would say, once again, it's also the approach to the business that speaks. But I would say in France, there is probably a lot more capital available because of the size, but also of the types of company that we have. Way more very big companies. I mean, not way more, but the let's say French companies, which gives like a very good, let's say, advantage when it comes to the point where you're looking for European fundings, because, well, we can talk about, like, at some point at the life of your startup, you are looking for fundings or for external investment, but you have to be a bit selective also, not necessarily based on only on the geographical aspect, but also on the type of implication that it will have. If you have a Chinese investor, if you have an American investor, it means also bringing different values, different approach to the business, and it will, or it can, reflect onto your customer at some point, or at least in the identity that you want to give. And I'm pushing more for trying to have European-based company, like, but also funded European-funded companies, because that really helps Europe as establishing itself as a player in the international scene. And I think we need more and more to do that. So we have these companies in France, but the, let's say, French investment ecosystem rotates, or let's say gravitates a lot around the same sphere. So you have a couple of incubators that are really well known, like Station F, or a couple of organizations like the French Tech, or surrounding, let's say, very famous schools that we can have, for example, Polytechnique. And you know that these startups that are coming out of these spheres, or will get their funding, or let's say VCs will more look at first at these companies, at these, let's say, startups. In the Netherlands, it's a bit more spread, and that's actually very good. It comes from, well, one, in the Netherlands, a lot of foreign companies are established, have their European HQ here, but also, I think it's probably, I mean, maybe not up to me to say, but my interpretation is also from the past of the Dutch, where they have to open themselves to the rest of the countries because they are smaller and they are surrounded by big, powerful countries like Germany or France, or maybe not Belgium, but UK.
Yeah.
Nothing against
Italy,
our Belgian friends, but let's say these big powers and economies. So they had to open themselves. And so they are way more open to try out. So smaller investments, smaller amounts from smaller entities. I see way more business angels here than in France, for example, at least in terms of proportions. And people are trying more. So yeah, that's the main differences I see.
Yeah. Hey, and what kind of trends do you see emerge in the startup ecosystem in France?
I would say the same as everywhere. You have a lot in artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of actually, I think France is really pushing, and it's good, to become the AI center in Europe. We see that, for example, Google put their new AI lab in Paris. We have OpenAI that opens also the headquarters in Paris. We have Mistral that is based in Paris. So we see that really that Paris is trying to attract the whole AI, let's say, ecosystem, which is good. I mean, good for the Parisian ecosystem and business. So a lot of companies are also, let's say, implementing themselves around. So that's a big trend. Now, of course, AI is, let's say, very large, because it's usually AI applied to some topics. Like, not a lot of companies can provide a general AI, general purpose AI. Most of them provide, let's say, a single or dual purpose AI. And here I see, for example, security, and I think it comes from the, let's say, the topics in which we excel, or at least in which we have like a strong influence. I see a lot in cybersecurity. I mean, French cybersecurity firms are very high, top notch. I see some in healthcare. I also probably bias my own bias from my network, but I see that in AI, for example, we had a couple of very high level, I mean, super high quality artificial intelligence, for example, in disease detection, so image detection. And yeah, and then I would say third one would be probably in finance, but also due, for example, for the predominance of finance, for example, in Paris, where I see that AI applied to finance and finance fintech startup are quite important, but to be honest, not as much as in the Netherlands, where, for example, Netherlands embrace much more the crypto ecosystem.
Yeah, I think the Dutch fintech economy is one of the biggest ones out there if you calculate it per capita. Hey, and so now you've been for, I think, 4 or 5 years worked as an entrepreneur here in the Netherlands and also exported your technology to France, but also other countries. So what is, let's say, the way you want to proceed to leverage France to what you already mentioned at the beginning, to African countries, perhaps the Montreal area, although that's perhaps not that big, but there are other continents that also have, let's say, French roots. What do you foresee there? Because Africa is a very upcoming market, and AI opens up that market because data and AI and intelligence is more accessible due to AI. What do you see for kind of opportunities when looking at yourself as a French entrepreneur and using the French market as a potential hub to those other continents?
Yeah, well, I see definitely that being on the two countries, France and the Netherlands, really helps because in the Netherlands, everyone speaks English. It's very easy to work 100% in English. And you have an enormous amount of foreign companies that are established here, American, but also Chinese and well, Russian to some extent. So being in the Netherlands allows you to serve all the English-speaking countries and really helps from a European perspective because we lost the UK from the EU. So a lot of companies came from UK to the Netherlands. So we have so that really serves this whole English-speaking part. And from France, yeah, well, because of the historical importance of France and the French colonies, not necessarily the best thing, but it is how it is. I think France has still a strong influence over French-speaking countries, or at least it allows to serve all these French-speaking countries in Africa. And Africa actually has a huge potential in terms of clever mind. I mean, you have now like super, like for example, the University of Addis Ababa is one of the best universities in Africa, and coming to also take out some of European universities. You have a lot of potential in terms of mind, in terms of market as well, because it's also demographies that are booming. So there will be a lot in the B2C. There will be a lot to do, and we see that now with teleworking, there is also a possibility for people to be in Africa, but to work for example, European companies or companies that have, let's say, the funds to hire and build something, and they bring back some of this wealth onto the country and then participates to development. So I think that's the same thing that we saw with East and Southeast Asia that happened in the past 30 years. I'm definitely seeing it for it. And French is a language for a very big chunk of all African countries. So it's definitely something. If you have a third one where you, for example, you're established in Spain or in a Spanish speaking country, then I think you cover 80 or 60% of the world.
Market. Yeah. And so, and if because you now are already quite established here, eh? So if a younger version of Jean-Hugues Migeon would knock on your door and would ask you, and that's potentially somebody from the Netherlands and lives here, starts business, and would ask your advice on entering French-speaking market or initially the French market, what would your advice be to this starting entrepreneur, knowing what you already know from the past years that you are running the startups?
Yeah. Well, first, very practical advice is, well, get to know France or French people and what they like. I mean, it's the same for what works for France works for any other culture, and it worked the other way around for me. Learning the Dutch culture, the Dutch way, the Dutch approach, the Dutch history helped me understanding also why certain things are organized the way they are, like this openness to business. Coming from the Dutch, let's say the Dutch merchant history, or I mean, business aside, like just the flower market and the price of the flowers here is, I mean, impressively low. Whenever I go back to France, I'm
you take flowers.
Yeah, I take flowers. No, but that's small things.
Yeah.
So the first thing, and so very practical advice is get to know. And for me, the way I know is to participate into more events that bridge the culture. So what for example, the Chamber of Commerce does, where I think it really helps, because it's a dual cultural
work both ways.
organization. So it's Dutch and French working together. So I think that's really helps. And historically, the Dutch are also very keen on France in general, so that helps. And then I would say you have to understand that the business will be different, not as cold or not as, let's say, based on efficiency or return on investment or what's the best approach, but it's a lot based on emotions.
Yeah.
So it's a bit more, let's say, Latin. It's a lot based on emotion, not corruption, I would say, but still, like, for example, if you want to do business, if you do it the French way, you go to the restaurants and you have a very good dinner, you pay a dinner or you have a drink. That's, let's say, difference. Whereas, for example, in the Netherlands, I've noticed that, of course, we do business dinners, but it's the ambience and the atmosphere is completely different. The focus is on the business, so you talk business. In France, if you go for a dinner, even though it's in a business setting, you just go for a dinner, you enjoy it, and then the following day you meet and you say, oh, it was a nice dinner, but now let's talk about business, and then you put numbers on the table. So it's just understanding this difference really helps, and building connection, because once a French, let's say, business person is satisfied with you, it works a lot by recommendation. And networking in France is way bigger and, let's say,
more valued.
More valued. So recommending someone is not something that you do lightly.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we had that conversation once, but I would not recommend someone I'm not 100% sure with. But that also gives quality and value to the recommendation, meaning that if I'm recommended someone, I will definitely talk to them. It does mean a lot.
Yeah, my experience also with you when we're visiting France is also that in the Netherlands it's more on a transaction. There it's more on emotion.
Yeah.
And if you have rapport with your customer in the French market by indeed having a nice dinner and also talk a little bit about, let's say, the things that matter into life, you have more connection, emotional connection that works better. Well, I think that's something that we can learn. So that would also be then an advice that you would give to this young entrepreneur knocking on your door. Yeah. Okay, good. And for older, let's say, because you are a younger entrepreneur doing business in both of the countries, if you are, let's say, an older entrepreneur or from a previous generation and you want to enter the French market, are there any other things that you would think are relevant to enter the market?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not so sure that the age matters so much.
No.
I have to say, well, you have to prepare yourself to be disappointed that no one speaks English. Oh, I mean, I'm exaggerating. It progressed a lot, but it is something. So if you come from an older generation of, for example, Dutch people,
Yeah.
you probably learned French at school.
School.
So
Yeah.
it's time to
Freshen it up.
to freshen it up, freshen it up, and use it. So you will finally find use for it.
I've learned earlier from you that AI can help you there.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you have translators that actually pronounce your tone of voice exactly in the same way. Yeah?
Exactly.
And then you speak French.
Yeah, definitely. No, and maybe to an older person, yeah, I think it's the very hierarchical approach. So you will have a lot of respect, but not necessarily. I mean, it's because it's just natural. So
Respect from the age, you mean?
Yeah. So you will have a way more respect for way more, not way more, but you will have more respect due to your age. Everyone will call you sir. I think you've noticed it once we had, for example, French interns. When we had at the Rafik, for example, he was always calling you Mr. Bobert.
Yeah.
Whereas
like
everyone here, where everyone was calling you Yuri, and then they say Mr. Bobert. So yeah, that's more like the difference. But yeah,
because my personal experience was also that you need to have a little bit more patience. So you need to be more patient in doing this transaction.
Yeah.
Meaning that it takes more time, but then indeed you have a more deeper and sincere relationship with your customer.
Yeah.
And they're also more loyal in terms of the long period.
Yeah, I think you talk from experience where we have meetings, but then you start 15 minutes late, and then you start by a coffee, and then you discuss about everything but the topic you're supposed to meet, and then you get into it.
Exactly.
It does require more patience, of course. Yeah. It's less straight to the point, but everything participates to building up the relationship.
Yeah.
So it's also longer, I would say, to sign contracts, for example, in France. In the Netherlands, it can go pretty quick, I have to say. Usually, also because in the Netherlands, the management is very horizontal. So you don't have so many layers to convince. At least that's what I've noticed. In France, it will be longer. You'll have to more climb through the ladder of the management and then find the right people. And it might be a bit more tricky and sometimes discouraging. But it's also why this relationship aspect comes into effect, and the recommendation. And if someone is telling you, hey, you have to see that person because he really has something that makes an impact, then really the people will take the time to do it, to talk with you.
That's also my experience. Yeah. Okay, nice. Thank you for these insights, both on the, let's say, entrepreneurship, as well as the cultural difference between doing business in the Netherlands as well as in France, and compared to other industries or other countries. So that was for us very enlightening to hear from you. I would like to thank you, Jean-Hugues, for for the conversation.
Thank you.
And I'll see you in business in our office.
Yeah, exactly. On to the next meeting. Thank you.